Hello and welcome. I'm Moira Cook and I am District Director for the Health Department here in Addison County. I'm also the convener of the Addison County Committee on Opiate Addiction. We are focused on prevention, education, treatment, and recovery for those who may be struggling with the disease of addiction. Today I'm really pleased to welcome our special guest, Raina Lowell, to our show. Thanks, Raina, for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Raina, I'm going to stumble a little over your title because it's long, but Raina's title is Community Outreach Coordinator and Patient Service Center Supervisor at Burlington Labs.
Nicely done.
Thank you. So Burlington Labs is a drug testing company with offices all over Vermont and the East Coast. Burlington Labs is also a really wonderful company in that it's mission driven and it gives 10% of its pre-tax profits back to the community. And we're thrilled to share that in Addison County, Burlington Labs supports recovery rides, which is free transportation to anyone who's working on their recovery so that they can get to doctor's appointments, 12-step meetings, counseling, and even to job interviews. So it's just an amazing resource for the community. And one last plug, Burlington Labs is hosting a wellness day on June 25th here in Middlebury on the town green, so we're excited about that as well.
I heard it was great last year. So
it was great last year, and we're looking forward to another wonderful event. So we're going to talk to you a little bit about your professional life and your personal life, and I'm going to share with our audience that you are a recovering addict. Yeah. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And that you were featured in the really amazing documentary film Hungry Heart, and you're here a little bit here to tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are today, and we're just excited to learn more about you. So thanks again. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Are you a native Vermonter? Where'd you grow up? Love to hear your story.
I am born and raised here in Vermont, and we started up in the Northeast Kingdom of Vermont in a little town called Holland. Most people haven't heard of it. And I was raised on a very small, somewhat self-sustaining family farm. It was a pretty simple, beautiful life.
Yeah. That's really lovely. So your life took a bit of a different turn, I understand, and I'm just going to get right into it.
Sure, let's do it.
Yeah, okay. So I understand that you became addicted to opiates because of after receiving prescription medication for pain.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. My story is a little bit different than many of the stories that we hear from people who suffer from substance abuse disorder, in that, I didn't become an addict until I was an adult. So I was a mother, I was a business owner, I was, a face in the community, and I had a very full life. And, I had gone through a personal tragedy that I think made me very vulnerable. And I also have addiction and alcoholism that runs on both sides of my family. So I was already kind of, I think, set up a little bit, though I'm not sure how aware of that I was.
Sure, right.
But I went to my family doctor with back pain that I've suffered from off and on for years, and he gave me a prescription for Vicodin.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And we had that conversation. He said, Raina, you need to be careful with these. They're addictive. And I said, yes, I know. And, and I really believed that I did know what that meant.
Okay.
But, I often talk about that moment when those opiates hit my bloodstream for the first time, because it was such a profound moment for me. I've suffered from anxiety my whole life. I was at the time pretty depressed. I had lost a child a few years earlier, and I was in a dark place.
Sure. Yeah.
And I had kind of developed this sort of sense of entitlement, I think, a little bit too. Like I had kind of paid my dues to the universe, and now I was owed something good. And so, I was weighed down by a lot of life's stuff. And when those opiates hit my bloodstream, it was like all of that anxiety and fear and grief and loneliness, all of that was just gone in an instant. It was just And then I felt finally free to kind of be who I wanted to be, you know, without all these obstacles in my way. So I kind of felt justified in that. I felt like I had found a medication that worked for me, you know?
Right. And I assume early on you were taking it as a medication. Tell us a little bit about how your addiction evolved and how it grew, because it sounds like you thought it was under control.
Yep.
You had this.
Yeah, for sure.
And so kind of what happened?
Yeah, so I definitely, you know, in retrospect, I see some of the big mistakes that I made, and you know, that is part of why I am so passionate about educating our communities. Because when I started to become aware that I was taking this medication for something other than what it was being prescribed for, my thought process went a little something like this. You know, my doctor is prescribing this medication. I'm recognizing that I'm taking them even when my back doesn't hurt, because it feels like a solution to me. I feel like these are enabling me to be a better mother, a better employee, a better daughter, sister, friend. And, you know, if things get to a point where I feel like I'm headed down a dangerous road, or I'm starting to make poor choices, or something doesn't feel right, then I'll stop. You know, and I had heard somewhere that it takes 3 days to detox opiates from your system. So I thought, okay, so if worse comes to worse, and I start to see kind of negative consequences, then I'll either wean myself off, or I'll stop, and I'll be sick for 3 days, and I'm sure that will be terrible, but I've been sick for 3 days before with other things. You know, and I have values, and my children come first, and I just... You know, I did not believe that I could or would ever do the things that I had seen other people do in active addiction. I made the mistake of believing that my values would not allow me to go down that road.
So it sounds like, though, things got further and further along, and that you did really struggle because you ended up in treatment, I'm assuming. So...
Yes.
So when did it get to the point where, okay, I can no longer wean myself, I can no longer go through 3 days of feeling lousy? How did that happen? And if this is not cool to kind of dredge up with the old stuff, we can move on to other questions.
No, I'm happy to talk about it. In fact, I think that these are really important conversations to have, and, you know, it's a part of how I heal, and it's a part of how... you know, I help sort of spread the message.
Okay.
Because,
I mean, I think it's important because all of a sudden you're feeling something different from a medication you're prescribed, and it sounds like your provider was pretty clear, like, be careful with these. And that's great to hear. I think our providers are really aware of the medications and the impact. But it's not that easy once you go down a road.
It's certainly not, and I think that the piece that many of us are missing is that powerlessness piece and what that actually means. To make the mistake of believing that who we are, that our intelligence, our values, the things that matter to us in our lives, that any of those things will come into play, is really a grave mistake.
Right.
Because that's not the nature of powerlessness. The nature of powerlessness is it doesn't matter what I want. It doesn't matter if I don't want to use, because I'm going to do it anyway.
Right.
And that's a really scary place to be, and that's where I found myself.
Okay.
So maybe when I would have found myself at that crossroads, when I would have said, oh, geez, you know, I'm starting to sort of notice some negative consequences, and I don't want to do this anymore, I was way too far into it. And, you know, and another mistake that I made, Moira, was believing that there was a difference between the drugs that I was taking and the drugs on the street.
Right.
That there was a difference between prescription opiates and abusing them in the way that I was, and, you know, the junkie on the street. Because certainly I'm not a junkie. You know, that there's a difference between me and those people. And
addiction is addiction is
addiction
addiction.
is addiction.
Yeah.
And, and my story is very similar to many other people's stories in that, eventually I got to a point where I could no longer get what I needed to feed my habit. And somebody said, I don't have that, but I do have this.
Right.
And the next thing I knew, I started checking off those I'll nevers. I'll never use heroin. I'll never use a needle. I'll never smoke crack. I'll never do,
Right.
So by the time I hit my bottom, I was an IV heroin user and a crack addict.
Yeah, that's pretty profound, from getting a
Yes.
pain pill for back pain
Yes.
and a warning from a physician.
Yeah.
So what happened to your family? What happened to your finances? What happened to your life? Do you mind sharing
No,
that?
not at all. It all fell apart. And I think sometimes maybe it's easy for people to sort of look at me today and think, oh, well, there's a difference between me and her because, I'm a little over 5 years in recovery today.
Congratulations, that's
Thank you,
huge.
Thanks. When I hit my bottom, things were really bad. They were really ugly. And I like to kind of tell that story because I think it's important for people to be able to identify, because that's an important part of spreading the message of hope, which is so important for me to do, So I was living in my house in Vermont with my kids in the middle of winter without heat, and the conditions of our home were unlivable. We had started living in just the living room of our house, and I would sneak over to our neighbor's house in the middle of the night and I'd steal their firewood. Sometimes I'd turn the stove on in the kitchen. And eventually I started smashing pieces of our furniture and burning it to stay warm. It was really ugly. I was sending my kids to school in the middle of winter without socks on their feet, and I was not, my children were not safe with me. And I tell people all the time that I didn't love my kids any less than I do today.
Right.
I loved them just as much, and I wanted nothing more than to put them first and their safety first. I was just too sick.
Right.
And at that point, I had been in and out of treatment many times. So this was not just a one-shot deal. This was not like, things are bad. When the first time I went into treatment was when I was still I say just, but I was still just using prescription narcotics. And then, when I hit my bottom and went to treatment this last time, there were lots of stays in rehab sort of in between those two. And I would do really well in treatment.
Sure.
Life's pretty simple there.
Right.
The challenge was coming home. Yep.
And so talk a little bit about relapse and what you know, because I think it's important to say, it's not a one-shot deal. You've got to work on this, and it's an ongoing, lifelong recovery. So
it certainly is, and I don't like to say that relapse is a part of recovery because it's not for everybody.
Right.
And I'll tell you, the first time I heard that was permission for me to go out and use, and that's exactly what I did.
Oh, wow.
So my first attempt at recovery, I heard that in an IOP meeting, which is an intensive outpatient program. And I thought, well, if relapse is a part of recovery, then I'm bound to relapse at some point. So, hey, let's have that be today,
Sure.
So, but it is a part of many of our stories, unfortunately. And certainly it is, I think, what gets a lot of us to that point of hopelessness. And I think that every addict knows what it's like to live without hope. And that's a really scary place to be.
It's horrendous.
Yeah.
It's horrendous.
And I certainly was no stranger to that feeling. And, I had long since lost my desire to live. But I had this sense of responsibility to my kids. And I kept picturing what their lives might be like without me in it. And, and I considered purposefully overdosing, and I considered the many different ways that I might try and end my life. And when I hit what I now believe to be my bottom, you know, I went to treatment just because of them. Because I felt like if I go to treatment one more time and I give it everything I've got, when it doesn't work, and I really truly believe that it was not going to work, when it doesn't work, then at least I can check out of this life knowing that I did everything in my power to get better. And that I just don't have it in me, you know, that whatever it is that other people have to get better, like I just don't have that special thing, you know. And
it's important to hear that because, you know, there may be other people who are right where you are, and to know that, wait a minute, you did pull yourself up and got better, and now 5 years out, you're doing great. So thank you for sharing all of that story. That's incredible. So tell us what kind of treatment you got, and what was it like, and was it hard to access, especially 5 years ago? And yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, you know, I mean, it is remarkable how different things are today than they were even just 5 years ago. We have come so far, and I have to tell you, Maura, it is so exciting for me to get to be a part of this whole movement, you know, because there really is a sea change happening. And
It really is.
and it's so amazing to get to be a part of that, you know, and to be at a place where I can sit with you and talk about this so freely.
Right.
You know, because I was just saturated in shame for so long.
I bet.
And, you know, and for a long time, I wanted to ask for help, and I didn't even know how to tell anybody what I had gotten myself into, because I felt like it was a reflection of my failing as a human being, you know?
We still feel that, you know, working in human services, that there's a stigma attached, but that, you know, it just can happen to anyone, and we know this, and see it, and there's no stigma to having a disease.
Right.
It's like having a chronic illness like diabetes.
Yes.
There's no stigma to that.
That's right.
So go ahead. Sorry,
Yeah.
I keep interrupting you.
No, not at all. No, and you know, and I think that the complicated piece of this is that while it is a disease, you know, the organ that it affects is the brain.
Right.
And so we often make the mistake of believing that, you know, this is about choice. That this is about, well, if you don't want to be doing this, why are you doing it? You know, seems pretty simple. You know, but I have learned through experience, of course, that it's not that simple.
Right.
And, you know, sometimes I describe it to people like, you know, let's say when I was at that point in my life when I was ready to sort of end things, I couldn't just hold my breath and kill myself, right? Because my survival instincts are going to kick in, and I'm going to take a breath, whether I want to or not, right? That is the same thing for an addict when it comes to using. Whether I want to do it or not, I'm going to do it.
Right.
And so accessing treatment, I went to the Brattleboro retreat.
Okay. Right.
I put my children in the care of my mother, and, you know, as I told you before, I had been in and out of treatment many times, did very well in treatment, and then I would come home and I would fall apart, and I couldn't put 30 days of sobriety together to save my life. So what I understood this time, because this was going to be it, I wasn't doing this again.
Right.
I didn't have it in me. So I left, and I didn't know when I was going to come back. You know, I just knew that I needed to go away, and I needed to relearn how to live life all over again, you know, and how to be a part of a community, and how to talk to people, and how to take care of myself and my hygiene, and then, you know, and then how to take care of my kids, and all of those little things that, you know, adults maybe take for granted. The
Sure.
simple things like paying bills and all of that stuff. I didn't know how to do any of that stuff anymore.
Which is incredible, given that you owned a business.
Yes.
And, I mean,
Yeah.
you know, to
Yes,
think about the
absolutely.
difference, and, you know, you were a known community leader, and then because of the drug.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, and so I was given what I believe, what they call the gift of desperation, right? So I became desperate enough that I finally understood that I could no longer listen to what was going on up here, because my thoughts were poisonous. You know, they were being fueled by my addiction. It was kind of like having a split personality, you know, but this other sort of personality she was so much stronger than I was. and she always got to win, no matter what I wanted. And so I got desperate enough that I understood that, and I threw my hands in the air and I said, okay, tell me what to do, and I'll do it, whatever it is.
That's great.
No more judgments. No more deciding whether or not I think that this applies to me, or if I want to do this, or if I should do it, or if I like it. Tell me what to do and I'll do it. And I started doing a lot of things I didn't want to do, that didn't make much sense to me. But if I was told to do it, I did it. And I'll tell you, that was the magic formula. And I think that it is for most of us. It's just, I think for many of us, it just takes getting to a very scary and desperate place if we're lucky enough.
Right. And letting go and trusting the process that treatment provides for you, and just giving it all to it.
Yes. And I was lucky, I was lucky that I had the luxury of, first of all, knowing that my children were safe.
Right.
That they were being cared for and loved by someone who loves them almost as much as I do. And, I was able to slowly reintegrate into the community, and with some good distance between me and my hometown and the old people, places, and things.
Right.
And that's a luxury that many people are not afforded, and I certainly recognize that.
Well, your story is inspirational because it does talk about just regaining hope and trust in yourself. So that's incredible. Thank you so much for sharing your story of coming out of a really dark and desperate time. And obviously it's still a work in progress.
Yep,
none
absolutely.
None of us are perfect.
I'm working on it.
That's a tough goal.
Yes.
If I want to just get a little bit about the community service side of your work, and then I'd like to close with what messages of hope you'd like to share with the audience of this program. So let's start with tell us a little bit about how you ended up with Burlington Labs after completing this amazing journey that you've been on.
Yeah, my role in Burlington Labs is really just a dream job for me. And it's been such a gift getting to work for a company that I believe plays such an important role in the recovery community here in Vermont and beyond. We're really expanding beyond that. But Burlington Labs is a responsible Vermont employer, and they practice what they call second chance hiring policy. And what that means is that they did not judge me based on my past.
That's great.
They did not look at me and say, she's a liability, we're not going there. Instead, they gave me the chance to redefine myself and to say, this is who I am today. This is, my past is a part of what makes me who I am today, and I believe that it gives me strengths that I didn't have before. And Burlington Labs recognizes that, and it really gives us the opportunity to become responsible members of our community and, to grow as people. And, they really took me as I was. And Lord knows, I don't know if I would have hired myself, frankly. My interview process was a little shaky. This is my first job in recovery, but they saw something in me that maybe I don't know if I even saw in myself at the time. And I have grown so much working for them, and being given an opportunity to be a part of the solution in our communities, and to be able to go to people and say, how can we be of service to you? What can we do to help?
That's fantastic.
It's such a gift.
That's fantastic. We only have a few minutes left, and I just want to ask you, what message do you want to convey or leave, about for somebody who's struggling, or a family member, a concerned family member? What do you think you could say or share to provide some hope?
Well, I guess you know,
That's a big order, I
well,
realize.
it is. I know. I'm thinking like that. That's a lot of responsibility.
I know.
Here.
Sorry.
No, it's okay, because I do think that it's important to say that I don't believe that I'm special. I believe that we all have it in us. I think that some of us have steeper hills to climb, but that there is support out there. Vermont has amazing support. We have an amazing recovery community. It is just incredible how many people are working to be a part of this common solution. And, you know, I think there is no room for shame.
Right.
And I believe it's my responsibility to share my story for that reason alone, because shame should not be the thing that kills us.
That's absolutely right. Thank you. That was incredible. I just really appreciate you taking the time and coming and sharing your story. We didn't have as much time as I would have liked to talk. It went really fast. Incredible story. And you are a resource. You have shared your story. I've seen you in the Hungry Heart. I've seen you at community events. So thank you for continuing to do this work. We really appreciate it. And so if there are folks who want more information about Raina's story or anything related to prevention, education, treatment, and recovery, our website is addictionhelpvt.com, and I encourage folks to just go and check it out. I really appreciate your time again. Thanks so much for talking with us. This was a great, and it was an honor for me to meet with you.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.